Welcome to Author Voices on Air and the stories behind the stories of today's literature and their authors. A presentation of Author Solutions and its publishers. Our host today connects with the writer to share the vision and inspiration behind their works. Insightful, informative, and always entertaining. Please welcome our host for this week's edition of Author Voices on Air.
Welcome to Author Voices on Air, and I'm your host, Rick Bell. Our next book is Decision Point, which is unquestionably the first book you should read if you want to succeed. The book is an exciting new approach to personal development and motivation. Decision Point focuses on the wide and general narrative to a single point. It shows the reader how to introduce small disciplines into their lives as part of the plan to personal success. And joining me now to give us an insight into the book Decision Point is the author, Nathan John. Welcome, Nathan. Thank you for joining me. Now, you told me off air that you spent a period of time in the armed forces. And I believe that is really a big part of what this book is all about. Not about your experience in the armed forces, but about how that has turned you into the person that you are today. So let's go right back to the beginning and ask you to tell us about how this book came to be and what was the main inspiration, what was the catalyst that started the whole thing off for you?
Hi, Rick. Well, thanks very much for having me on your show. That's a real privilege, so thank you very much. I think with the military, it's been such a pervasive feature of my life, having served for 20 years. I took huge amounts of lessons and guidance during those 20 years. And in that time, not only did it sort of shape my character to what it is today, it also embedded a foundation of discipline in me, which was the foundation and bedrock for everything I do or have done thereafter. And I think what I wanted to communicate in Decision Point was elements of military discipline and how it can be hugely advantageous to anyone's personal development. So that was my primary driver in writing Decision Point.
Now, obviously, the purpose of this book is to send a message out to the readers and to help other people. But did you have a particular type of person, a particular reader in mind when you were writing this book? And if so, who is that reader?
I did, and it changed throughout the writing process. At the beginning of writing the book, I was originally writing that book for me, essentially, when I was 10, 12, 15 years old. I just thought at the time that I needed or would have really benefited from some bedrock guidance to help my decisions going forward, because I didn't have a great foundation in the beginning. So it was written for myself and people in a similar situation back then. Throughout the writing process, though as I matured in the writing, it grew, the audience grew, and I realised that actually with myself as the foundation who I was writing to, the things that I'd learned in the military, actually anybody can benefit from these lessons. They are the most basic, in some circumstances, they are the most basic lessons, such as a regular daily hygiene routine, but also can get more complicated and developed as you build in Kaizen principles, which are in the book, which are basically small steps that have a huge impact overall. So the book appeals to everybody. It's not gender specific, it's not age specific. I genuinely believe there's something there for everybody.
Now, you touched on one point which actually fits in really well with my next question. You touched on the point there that one of the disciplines it teaches you is about personal hygiene. But aside from that, if you could choose one other thing that you think really is the starting point for teaching people the way forward in their lives. From this book, what would that one thing be?
It's a tricky question, but I do know the answer because I do refer to it in the book, and there's a chapter on it. But I think the one single tenet or factor that I've used throughout my life to great success is belief, self-belief specifically. And I think that without that, I really think that anybody would struggle to achieve their preset goals, aims, and targets. Belief is step one, stage one. And so I write the book with a view to underpinning people's self-belief. I write the book to dispel any self-sabotage because I really want to get to the heart of every individual reader, so they read the pages and start to understand that the strength and qualities that they have in them. You know, we repair ourselves from the inside out, and that's what this book helps everybody do.
Now, would you agree with if I use the word cliche or saying that some people have, that if you want other people to respect you, that starts with learning to respect yourself? Would you agree with that?
I would. I think it's hugely important because we all have role models and idols that we look up to, whether it be, celebrity or sportsmen and women or, captains of industry. And all those people that we do look up to and aspire to, they have this self-respect and self-belief within themselves. And we as humans, we find that attractive. It's a very natural human connection that we have. So I do think it's very important that, you start with that yourself, and self-belief being critical to your own success.
You mentioned there celebrities, sports personalities, and people like that others look up to. From your personal point of view, who has been your mentor? Who's been the one person that's been a big influence in your life?
Well, I mean, sadly, Rick, I probably couldn't put it down to one person. I didn't really have a stable father figure growing up, if I'm honest. So throughout my life, I guess I used other people to latch onto and just look at their values and standards and traits and found attraction to some of those. And it's not that many, but it's enough. And you only need one person, to inspire you. But in the military, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to name names, but there was one particular commanding officer I had when I was serving in Germany with the Royal Scottish Dragoon Guards. And he was just incredible at everything. He was intelligent, he was empathetic, he was fierce, he was loyal. And I just thought, wow, some of those qualities, I want people to look at me and feel the same way. So it drove my own behaviours as well, which were already underpinned by the normal military values and standards. And I want to mention a second one because it's important. And it was in my own cap badge, the head of our arm and service. At the time I was in the Adjutant General's Corps, was the highest ranking female officer at the time, a female brigadier. She's now retired. And I'd never met such an imposing and just awesome character. She was, again, had all the qualities and more, of her, male peers. And again, I just looked at her and thought the struggle that she'd have gone through to reach that rank would have been incredible. So again, there's, two people, again, they're military people who inspired me, but, they, for the 20 years that I was serving, they were the people that I looked up to.
And two wonderful people, by the sounds of it. Now, let's go back to writing this book. This is the first book that you've written, so obviously it's a big achievement for you, and we'll talk about that positive aspect of it in a moment. But there must have been a first-time book, there must have been some big hurdles that you needed to climb over, some big challenges to face. Tell us about that side of it.
To be honest with you, Rick, again, they're ever present. And even though I write this book, teaching and telling the readers everything I've learned over the years, I still suffer from the same self-doubt and imposter syndrome as everyone else. So I have to practice what I preach regularly to make sure that I overcome those hurdles. And in the early days, some of the biggest hurdles that I faced was probably my transition from soldier to officer, which is I write about it briefly in the book, but it's quite a rare thing for a soldier to apply for a commission at the Royal Military Academy in Sandhurst. The percentage is less than 5% of soldiers actually do that. And at the time, I had little to no formal education, some very low level GCSEs, and back in 2004, 2005, when this was 90+% of all Sandhurst students were graduates and had degrees. So I felt hugely intellectually inferior, and this was a burden I carried for a long time. But I knew that once I got through the training and commissioned as an officer, then it's something I could deal with on the other side, for want of a better phrase. So that was probably the first real challenge I faced in the military. The military training itself wasn't too challenging. It was the same as everyone else, but putting your head above the parapet and going to Sandhurst was probably the first real challenge, and that started then a learning trend for years, where I went on to, I think I ended up with 4 degrees, bachelor degrees, master's degrees, and postgraduate diplomas, because I kind of got addicted to learning, and also at the time I thought it was proving to everyone how capable I was, but what I actually was doing was just proving to myself, and it was that imposter syndrome rearing its head is what spurred me on and on and on.
Now, let's take those challenges and those achievements in your life and move on to the challenge of writing this book. Tell us about that side of it. I mean, what were some of the things you had to overcome to be able to take what was originally an idea, originally a message for the readers of your book? And you've mentioned yourself that you initially were writing this book for yourself, but then you decided that it was something you wanted to share with other people. So writing a book for the first time, that is a big achievement itself, but it comes with its own challenges. Tell us about those challenges.
I think the self-critique was ever present, and I found, once the euphoria of deciding to write a book had passed, a week into it, and I'd, brain dumped the first sort of the introduction, for example, and maybe chapter 1, you quickly run out of steam, and then you, when I say you, I mean me, you start to question yourself and think, well, actually, can I do this and have a bit enough more than I can chew? And the problem is I've told people now that I'm going to do this, and well, then I can't fail these people because I'd look silly. So these are the demons that start to, speak to you at the worst time. So these are the huge challenges that I had to overcome. And I did reach out to friends and to other creative people that I know, and just saying, how do you get motivated? You've heard of writer's block, and so I'd go on other forums with other authors, and just say, how have you got over this block, and how do you get over the self-critique? And to be honest, it was different for everybody. And even to this day, the book is published and it's out there, and I still do wonder, despite several high praise reviews from the various platforms that it's being sold on, and friends, you still find yourself questioning whether it's good enough or whether it will be liked, and you're almost waiting for that one bad review, and I'm sure it will come. There are 7 billion people on this planet, and you can't please everybody, but it's one of those daily challenges that any writer will face.
And would you not agree that being self-critical should be seen as a positive thing and not a negative thing? Because I personally have always believed that if you're someone that can be critical of your own work in a productive way, in a positive way, then you're always going to strive for improvement. So you're going to become better and better at what you do. Whereas if you're someone that thinks what you do is wonderful from day one, then how can you hope to evolve, to improve?
I couldn't agree more. I think that the key word is balance. The self-critique does keep you on your toes, and for me, I want to make sure that my writing is authentic and real and true, and it's not a case of just pumping out a book because that's the contract that's been given to you by your publisher. It's got to be pure and real and true, because it's my name on the cover. So yeah, it definitely keeps me sharp, and it's not bad. But I think if it ever got to a point where it would become overwhelming, I think that's when you need to take a step back and take a breather. But fortunately for me, the critique is good. It just keeps me sharp.
Absolutely. And on the positive side of things, for you, now you set the whole thing. You've written this book after a lot of research, a lot of hard work, a lot of self-criticism, if I can use that term. You finally have this printed, published book in your hand. Tell us how that felt for you.
It was incredible. There's really no other word to describe it. And I for months, leading up to it being published, I was on forums and seeing other authors, receive their author copies through the post. And I'll never forget the day I got mine. It was like all of my Christmases had come at once. And you open that box and you pull out the first, book itself, first physical copy, which I've kept as my own personal copy. And it's everything. It's like validation. Everything that you've done in your life up until that point, decision point, really is the culmination of everything I've got to offer up to that point. So it's really a capstone, a real marker for me, a real milestone in my life where I can say, right, I can draw a line in the sand now. Everything was good up to this point. It was all worth it. The good times, the bad times, everything, culminated in that body of work. So it means an awful lot to have that final finished published article. And now it's published. The thing I want more than ever is to help just one other person. If someone else can gain an insight or get a tip or something that helps them sleep easier or make a better decision or gives them some direction and focus in life, then I will have more than achieved and surpassed any goal that I set myself.
And there is no better reward. Now, talking about reward, the reward for our listeners and your readers is the news that the experience of writing this book has in fact inspired you to write another book that you're working on at the moment. Share something of that with us.
Yeah, it was kind of unexpected. I wrote and finished Decision Point, and became just so fulfilled, is probably the only word I could use for it, by going through the creative writing process. If you think back, from my previous 20 years, I've been in the military where, creativity isn't top of the agenda there. It's, polish your boots and stand by your beds. So to write Decision Point was an opportunity for me to, delve deep inside myself and find another part of my character that was maybe repressed from school or never existed before. So you then start to get inspiration from just everywhere, and how I can take Decision Point or the lessons in Decision Point and enhance them and make them better or more accessible. So I have got another book that's currently being drafted. I don't really have a title yet, but I know exactly the direction that I'm going in, and I really look forward to having a chat with you again sometime in the future when I talk about that one.
And we'll very much look forward to it. You mentioned you haven't got a title. Do you not have maybe even a working title? A title that you call it in your head, if that makes sense?
Yes, I do. It's loosely based around the number 8. The number 8 is a very, very important number. I don't want to go too much into it, but it's very exciting. It's 8 very key points that will make a huge difference to anybody's life.
Oh, we'll look forward to that. Now, I've got one question for you that might actually be more challenging than all the other questions, but it's a very short and simple question. Give me 3 words that, in your opinion, your head, best describe Decision Point.
Wow, that is tricky. In 3 words, wow. I think the first one would have to be inspired. I was inspired to write it, and I'm hoping that that's the byproduct for all the readers as well. The second one would be persistence, because again, I think it's an undertone message throughout the book. I employed persistence throughout my life to up to the point of writing and publishing the book, and I hope that the readers will also use persistence and embody persistence in any of their goals that they set themselves in life. And I think the final one would be to be optimistic, because there's no real point in being a pessimist in life. It leads to nothing. The world is a really great and beautiful place with great and beautiful people in it, and optimists just add to that greatness.
Not only for themselves, but for everyone else around them.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that. I'm sorry that I had to finish there with a very challenging question. Now, moving on to the final question, in closing, we've talked in great detail about the book, about your time in the army, and how that was, in a big way, a catalyst behind this book. But is there anything that we haven't talked about that you feel is important for our listeners and for your readers to know about this book?
Well, it's interactive, and that may seem a bit of an odd thing to say for an inanimate book, but it's, you buy a physical copy of this book, and you're part of the community as far as I'm concerned. I've done as much as I possibly can to make it accessible to everybody, and I've just actually published the audio book, which is available on audible.co.uk. But also, on top of that, I've got a website which people are very welcome to go and visit and register and just be part of the community. And also Instagram. I post daily motivational quotes on Instagram for my readers, and you can get me there on my Instagram handle is at @nj_author. So just connect, just say hi, and if we ever meet, let's have a coffee.
Well, that's certainly inspirational words, and I'm sure that you're going to hear a lot from our listeners and your readers out there. And one last thing I'd like to mention to our listeners is that you write under the name Nathan John, but that is in fact a pen name, and I know that you won't mind me telling people this, but your actual name is Nathan Davis. So I just thought I'd pop that into the interview just for people to know. So thank you for that. Decision Point is published by Author House and is available direct from the publisher at authorhouse.com/bookstore and all good bookstockists. Well, once again, it has been my pleasure speaking to the inspirational author of Decision Point, Nathan John. Thank you for joining me, Nathan, and we wish you every success with Decision Point and with all your future endeavours. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Rick, for having me on the show. Thank you.
This is Rick Bell for TogiNET Radio 2.0. Thank you for listening.